Dust hung thick in the air, turning the late afternoon sun into a dull coin pressed against the sky. The frontier market smelled of sweat and sour whiskey, of animals penned too close, and men standing closer still. Voices rose and fell in the rhythm of bargaining. Prices shouted. Laughter spat out like chewed tobacco. It was a place where everything had a number. Everything had a use. At the edge of it stood the girl. She was small beneath a threadbare shawl, boots 2 sizes too big, hands folded tight, as if holding herself together. Her father swayed beside her, breath sharp with drink, eyes glassy and impatient. He talked loud, too loud, words slurring as he pitched his own blood like a mule with a bad leg. "Don't hear a thing," he kept saying, tapping the side of his head and laughing. "Can't talk back neither." The crowd chuckled. A few men nodded, already counting coin. The girl didn't move. She stared at the dirt, watching ants work around a crushed orange peel. Silence wrapped her like armor. To the men, it meant nothing, meant emptiness. They assumed she understood nothing of the numbers being thrown, nothing of the future being decided in the open like this. Then a horse whinnied. A bid rose. Another fell away. From the back of the crowd, a rancher watched. He was alone the way men get when they've learned not to expect company. His hat brimmed shadowed eyes that had seen hard winters and harder choices. He didn't come to buy trouble. He didn't come to buy anything at all. But the casual cruelty of it, the way the father's hand pressed between the girl's shoulder blades, steering her forward, made his jaw set. "What's the price?" the rancher asked. The father grinned, thinking it easy money. Coins changed hands. Papers weren't signed. No one questioned it. The market moved on, already forgetting her. As the rancher turned to lead the girl away, she finally lifted her head. Just for a moment, her eyes met his, clear, steady, unafraid in a way that didn't fit the story everyone else believed. And when a man behind them laughed, sharp and sudden, her shoulders flinched. The rancher stopped. That flicker, too quick to be coincidence, settled in his gut like a stone. Because deaf girls didn't react to laughter they couldn't hear. And in that instant, he knew. This was no simple rescue. It was the beginning of something the frontier had tried very hard not to see. The rancher's cabin sat far from the road, crouched low against the wind as if it had learned long ago not to stand too proud. Smoke curled thin from the chimney, and the door creaked when he pushed it open, letting the cold spill inside. The girl stepped in behind him, clutching her shawl, eyes moving quickly, corners, shadows, exits. She did not look afraid in the way people expected fear to look. She looked prepared. Inside, the cabin carried the weight of years lived alone. One chair, one table scarred by knife marks and time, a bed pushed against the wall, neatly made, untouched by softness. The rancher hung his coat, set his hat down slow, deliberate. He spoke, voice low and careful, explaining the rules of the place, where she could sleep, what work needed doing, what would not be asked of her. He watched her face as he talked, assuming her stillness meant she did not understand. But she did. She understood every word, every warning disguised as kindness. She understood that "you'll be safe here" came with conditions. That safety, on the frontier, was never free. She nodded when he finished, eyes downcast, playing the part the world had taught her would keep her alive. Inside, she measured him the way one measures weather, watching for signs of a storm. Silence settled between them, thick as dust. He poured water, slid a plate of food across the table, then stepped back as if afraid to crowd her. She waited until he sat before touching anything, a habit learned the hard way. The rancher noticed that, noticed how she mirrored his movements, how her gaze lifted when the floor creaked, how she flinched not at noise, but at tone. That unsettled him. Before turning in for the night, he spoke again, firmer this time. "You're not owned here. You're not to leave the place without telling me, and no one comes near you without my say." He meant protection. He meant distance from harm. He did not know she heard every syllable, felt the weight of his intent settle somewhere between relief and caution. She lay down on the pallet near the fire, eyes open long after the flames burned low. The cabin breathed around her, wood popping, wind pressing close. This place was quiet, yes, but quiet could lie. And tonight, Trust would not come from words spoken aloud, but from what was done when no one was watching. Morning came quietly to the ranch, the kind of dawn that didn't announce itself so much as seep in through the cracks. Frost clung to the grass like a thin white skin. The rancher moved through his routines without speaking, would split, water drawn, fire coaxed back to life. The girl watched from the doorway, hands folded in the sleeves of a borrowed coat, learning the rhythm of a place that had learned to live without voices. Chores became their common tongue. He showed her how to mend a fence with wire and patience. She watched his hands, then copied the motion, careful and exact. At the table, he set down a plate, nodded once, and stepped back. She ate slowly, as if each bite might be taken away. When the coffee boiled over, she startled, then steadied herself, eyes darting not to the sound, but to his face, measuring whether she'd done wrong. He said nothing. He only pushed the pot aside and set a rag beneath it. That was kindness here, no questions asked. Her past came in pieces, never all at once. A bruise she hid when she thought he wasn't looking. A flinch when boots thudded outside his boots. A habit of shrinking when men's shadows crossed the floor. At night, she slept near the wall, knees tucked, one hand clenched around nothing. The frontier had taught her that being unseen was safer than being heard. Deafness, real or assumed, had made her invisible. Invisible meant spared. Sometimes, his own history surfaced in the spaces between work. He kept his back to the door while sharpening tools. He ate standing, as if ready to leave at any second. On the shelf above the hearth sat a small, dust-softened trinket, something once held, then set down and never touched again. Loss lived here, quiet and permanent. He'd trusted once. The land had taken payment. They learned each other without naming it. He noticed how she tracked movement before sound, eyes flicking to lips, to throats, to hands. He noticed how she set the kettle down before it rattled, how she anticipated the slam of a shutter and turned away a heartbeat early. Once, a board creaked behind her, and she turned. Too fast, too precise. He paused, knife mid-stroke, and watched her watch him. There were moments, small, dangerous moments, when the mask slipped. A whistle from the wind through the eaves, and her shoulders rose. A cough from his chest in the cold air, and her head tilted, listening. Listening. He tested nothing. He asked nothing. The frontier had taught him that truths came out when they were ready, or not at all. That night, by firelight, he slid a scrap of charcoal across the table. She hesitated, then drew a line. A fence. A smaller line beside it. A figure standing alone. He nodded once and added another mark, a gate left open. She looked up, startled, then lowered her eyes. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was holding something. Something neither of them was ready to say. The sound reached the cabin before the man did. Hoofbeats, uneven, careless, cutting through the late afternoon quiet. The rancher stiffened where he stood by the corral, one hand resting on the fence rail. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. Some kinds of trouble carried a familiar weight. The drunken father rode in crooked, had tipped too far back, eyes already dulled by liquor and spite. He slid from the saddle with a laugh that scraped like rust. "Heard you got yourself a bargain," he called out, loud enough for the girl to hear. "Heard you been wasting good coin on something that don't even listen." The girl froze inside the doorway. Her hands, busy moments ago with a bucket, stilled midair. At the word bargain, her shoulders tightened. At wastin', her breath hitched. The rancher noticed it all. The way her eyes flicked toward him when the man said coin. The way fear sharpened when the father sneered. "She's mine. Always was. You want her. You pay again." "That's far enough," the rancher said, voice low but steady. He stepped between them without thinking, broad shoulders blocking the doorway. "You sold what you had no right to sell. Take your money and ride." The father laughed again, louder this time. "You think she knows what you're saying? Think she understands a word?" He leaned forward, breath sour. "Say it, girl. Tell him you're deaf as dirt." At the word deaf, her flinch was unmistakable. Not confusion, not blankness. Fear sharp and specific. The rancher felt something shift in his chest, like a latch clicking loose. He'd spoken plenty in front of her before. Never seen that reaction. Never like this. "You heard enough," the rancher growled, hand drifting closer to his belt. "You're not welcome here." The father's grin faltered, just a fraction. He spat in the dust, eyes narrowing. "This ain't finished," he muttered. "Ain't nobody's business what's mine." As the rider turned away, the rancher didn't watch him go. He watched the girl. Watched her steady herself. Watched her eyes follow every word spoken. And for the first time since she'd arrived, he wondered if the silence he'd believed in was a lie she'd learned to survive. The rancher moved with purpose now, the kind that came from knowing trouble would return. He checked the rifle by lamplight, ran an oiled cloth down the barrel, counted cartridges twice. He wedged a beam across the back door, tested the window latches, dragged a feed trough to block the narrow approach by the corral. Outside, the wind worried the grass and carried distant hoofbeats that might have been nothing, or might not. He didn't speak while he worked. He didn't need to. The land had already said enough. She followed him without being asked. When he lifted a crate, she slid a block beneath it. When he reached for nails, they were already in her palm. She moved with a careful confidence that surprised him. Quick eyes, steady hands, no wasted motion. She pointed to a loose hinge before he saw it, tapped twice where the plank bowed, pressed her shoulder against the door while he drove the last spike home. He caught himself watching her work, recalibrating the quiet assumptions he'd carried like old scars. They learned each other in the spaces between sounds. He learned the way she read his shoulders, how a pause meant wait and a sharp breath meant now. She learned the weight of his silences, the difference between caution and fear. When the lantern guttered, she shielded it with her sleeve. When the horse snorted at the fence, she stilled it with a touch. Words would have slowed them. Silence made them exact. At the table, she took a scrap of charcoal and wrote on the back of a feed sack. Simple marks, steady lines. Doors first, then windows, then rest. He nodded and added his own. If they come, stay low. She underlined it once, firm. Later, she sketched the yard from memory, traced a finger along the blind spot by the mesquite, circled the rock pile where a man could hide. He felt a tightening in his chest. Not fear this time, but something like respect settling into place. When the work was done, they sat on the steps and watched the dusk bleed into night. He passed her a cup of coffee. She warmed her hands and met his eyes. No gratitude, no apology, just understanding. The cabin stood quieter now, stronger. Not because of boards or iron, but because two people had learned to listen, really listen, without a single word spoken. Whatever came next would find them ready, not as owner and property, not as rescuer and rescued, but as allies holding the line together. The trouble didn't come quietly. It rode in with the sun at its back and dust boiling under hooves. Too many riders for coincidence, too deliberate for chance. The rancher saw them first from the rise behind his cabin, dark shapes cutting across the pale earth. He didn't count them. He didn't need to. He felt it in his chest. This wasn't a visit. It was a taking. He moved fast, the way men do when they've already made peace with what's coming. Rifles came off pegs. Windows were shuttered. The door bar slid home with a dry, final sound. Outside, voices carried, laughing, jeering, the drunk father's rasp cutting through the rest. He called the girl's name like a claim, like a rope thrown around her neck. The rancher felt heat rise behind his eyes, steady and dangerous. The girl stood near the back wall, pale but upright. She'd gone still in a way the rancher had come to recognize. Not fear exactly, but focus. He gestured for her to stay low, assuming she hadn't heard the threats spilling through the air. He spoke anyway, soft and firm, words meant to calm. Don't move. Whatever happens, don't move. She nodded once, eyes locked on his, and he turned back to the door. The first shot shattered the morning. Wood splintered. A window blew inward in a spray of glass and dust. The rancher fired back without hesitation, the recoil hammering his shoulder as the air filled with smoke and shouting. Men fanned out, trying angles, calling to each other. The father's voice rose again, slurred, angry, promising pain. "Bring her out," he shouted. "She's mine." The rancher ducked as a round punched through the wall, where his head had been. He swore and rolled, coming up behind the table. The girl crawled, quick and silent, hands sure on the floorboards. Another shot cracked, closer this time. He risked a glance toward her and froze. She had turned her head, not at the vibration, not at the movement, at the words. "Left side!" Someone yelled outside, and the girl's eyes snapped toward the sound before she could stop herself. It was small, a flicker, but it landed like thunder in the rancher's mind. His heart skipped. He stared at her, the noise of the fight falling away for half a breath. She met his gaze, and in it, he saw apology. There was no time to ask. Another shot tore into the doorframe, showering them with splinters. The rancher shouted without thinking, "Down! Now!" And she dropped, instantly, precisely, before the echo had even faded. No guessing, no delay. She heard him. The truth slammed into place as clean and sharp as a loaded round. She wasn't deaf. Not fully. Not the way they'd all believed. The rancher felt a surge of something fierce and bright cut through the fear. Understanding. Possibility. He changed tactics in that heartbeat. "Listen to me," he said, loud and clear, trusting it now. "When I say move, you move. When I say stop, you stop." Her nod was tight, determined. He saw strength there he hadn't known how to name before. Not weakness survived, but strategy learned the hard way. They moved like that, voice in motion, sound in response. He warned her of shots before they came. She pointed, quick and sharp, toward footsteps he couldn't hear over the ringing in his ears. Twice, her hand saved his life. Once, his shout pulled her clear of a collapsing beam. The cabin shook under the assault, but they held. Outside, the attackers grew reckless. Anger made them sloppy. The father screamed again, closer now, and the girl flinched, not in fear, but fury. The rancher saw it and made a choice. "Back door," he said. "When I count 3. They burst out together into the open, smoke and dust swallowing them. The rancher fired, dropped one man, then another. The girl moved when he told her, exactly when he told her, slipping between shadows, staying ahead of danger by inches. Someone shouted a warning, too late, and she ducked as a bullet hissed over her head. The father stumbled into view, wild-eyed, bottle gone, hands shaking. He raised his gun, and the girl spoke. "Stop." One word. Clear. Loud. Not shouted. Commanded. It stunned him. Stunned everyone. For a breath, the world held still. The rancher fired into that pause, the report final and clean. The father went down, the threat ending not with a whimper, but a reckoning. Silence followed, broken only by wind moving through torn grass. The remaining men fled. The dust settled. The rancher stood there, chest heaving, staring at the girl like he was seeing her for the first time. She stood too, dust-streaked, shaking, unbroken. She heard, and because she did, they were still alive. The dust settled slow, like it needed time to understand the violence was done. Hooves faded into the distance. Shouts dissolved into the open land. What remained was the ranch, scarred, silent, still standing. The threat that had come riding with cruelty and claim was gone now, driven off by resolve stronger than fear. They stood in the quiet that followed, the kind of quiet that feels different from silence. The girl's hands trembled, not with terror anymore, but with release. She looked at the rancher, really looked at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, she spoke before he did. "I hear," she said softly. The words landed heavier than gunfire. She explained it in pieces, careful and plain. She could hear some things. Not everything. Enough to survive. Enough to know when footsteps meant danger. Enough to learn that pretending not to hear made her invisible, and invisible meant